free. We're here to help.
Terwilliger Plaza, a continuing care retirement community in the heart of downtown Portland. Information on living at Terwilliger Plaza and the new expansion at Terwilliger's website. Muse Art and Design, offering a full range of supplies to help turn ideas into art. Muse Art and Design in Portland at Hawthorne and 42nd.
Good evening, I'm Judy Woodruff. On the NewsHour this Wednesday, the lead story, A Pirate's Tale, the hijacking and partial release of Americans off the coast of Somalia. The rest of the day's news, including the rising death toll in the Italy earthquake. Ray Suarez talks to Congresswoman Barbara Lee, just back from meeting Fidel and Raul Castro in Cuba. Simon Marks tells the story of two Indias, the booming high-tech sector and the still developing farm economy. And the latest milestones in the gay marriage movement.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by...
Wow, that's it?
It's got purples and greens.
It looks very complicated.
It looks like a little solar panel.
This is what makes my computer tick, this little thing.
This really allows me to connect with my family in Beijing.
I couldn't teach my class without this.
This is the thing that lets me make movies.
Well, I think that's pretty fantastic that this little thing makes so much possible.
The world is changing, and how we use energy today cannot be how we use it tomorrow. There is no one solution. It's not simply more oil, more renewables, or being more efficient. It's all of it. Our way of life depends on developing all forms of energy and to use less of it. It's time to put our differences aside. Will you be part of the solution? Chevron, human energy.
Grant Thornton.
The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, working to solve social and environmental problems at home and around the world.
And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Our lead story, pirates off the coast of Somalia hit American targets today. The American crew of a container ship carrying food aid bound for Kenya regained control, but the captain was held hostage on a nearby lifeboat. And the Associated Press, citing U.S. officials, reported U.S. warships in the area were en route to the scene. Gwen Eiffel has our report.
The 500-foot merchant ship Maersk, Alabama, with a crew of 20 Americans, was taken in the Indian Ocean, 350 miles off the Somali coast. The vessel, based in Norfolk, Virginia, was on its way to the Kenyan port of Mombasa with a relief shipment from USAID, the World Food Program, and other agencies. Crew members were able to retake control of their ship after about 12 hours under pirate control, according to multiple reports. But the Maersk, Alabama's captain, Richard Phillips, was not immediately released, according to a member of the crew who spoke to the Associated Press and to CNN. John Reinhardt, the CEO of Maersk Line Limited, which owns the vessel, said he had received a call saying the crew was safe, but he resisted saying more.
Speculation is a dangerous thing when you're in a fluid environment.
The Maersk, Alabama was the 6th ship commandeered just this week by pirates in the lawless waters off the East African coast. A Kenya-based official of the World Food Program, which was expecting the Alabama's arrival, said the pirates are less interested in cargo than in the ransom the hostages might bring.
There is sometimes long
period of negotiation between the owners and the pirates. And usually in these cases, the crew is not harmed. And after the negotiation, a ransom is paid, and the ship and the crew and the cargo are released.
Earlier this year, millions in ransom were paid to free 2 other ships and their crews, one Saudi, one Ukrainian. The pirates' range has shifted as a coalition of navies has begun to patrol the waters off the Horn of Africa. Today's attempted hijacking took place well away from shore and much further south than previous attacks.
What we have is a policy of prevention, and all the crews are trained in security details on how to deal with piracy by way of speed, by the way we operate. But as merchant vessels, we do not carry arms.
John Reinhardt said the patrols are not enough.
Obviously, we're dealing with a geography that's so big, the amount of support that's there now is not sufficient. The Navy takes care of the U.S. flag ships, but the area is too big for them to cover with the assets they have deployed right now.
Lieutenant Stephanie Murdoch is the spokeswoman for the U.S. Fifth Fleet, which patrols the area. The closest Navy ship to the Maersk, Alabama, was nearly 350 miles away.
The length of the Somali coastline is roughly the same length as the entire eastern seaboard of the United States. So it's a very large amount of space that ships would need to cover, and they can't be everywhere to catch everyone, unfortunately.
Today's attack was the 50th so far this year, and just the latest in a continuing wave of piracy off the African coast. For more on today's high seas developments, we turn to Brian Jenkins. He advises the RAND Corporation and the International Maritime Bureau, which tracks piracy. He's also deputy chairman of the security firm Kroll Associates. Mr. Jenkins, was what we saw happen today typical of this sort of thing, or was it atypical in some way?
It is typical in terms of vessels being attacked by pirates off the coast of Somalia. It is atypical in that this particular case, the crew managed to regain control of the vessel, except for the one crew member who is still apparently held by the pirates. That part is unusual.
As much as we have talked about piracy off the coast of East Africa, and as much has occurred there in the last several weeks, this is the first time we've seen a U.S. flagged ship involved in this. Why is that?
It is. Well, first of all, U.S. flagged ships with U.S. crews are relatively rare. Most vessels fly foreign flags. This one is flying a U.S. flag because it's under contract to deliver U.S. aid, and therefore, according to the rules, also has a U.S. crew. So U.S. is rarely involved in these, simply because there aren't too many U.S. flag vessels.
In the other cases, when there have been non-U.S. flag vessels which have been hijacked, have there been cases where the crews have taken the ship back, as happened today?
I don't know. I can't think of a case where the crew has taken back its own ship. So that part is unusual. Normally these pirates come aboard these vessels from small boats that operate from a mothership. A mothership will go out several hundred miles to sea and then launch motorboats who will search for prey, and one or several of these boats will then come after some merchant ship. They are armed with automatic weapons, in some cases with rocket-propelled grenades, whereas the crews are unarmed. So it is more often the case when they are able to board a vessel that they take the crew hostage, and then we enter into negotiations for a ransom.
Since this is a privately owned vessel and not a U.S. government ship, even though it's flying under a U.S. flag, why shouldn't the company just pay the ransom the way other ships have and end this?
Well, we don't want to talk about the specifics of this case, because it is a situation that is still taking place, and anything that anyone can speculate about can really complicate things. But, you know, in any of these cases, it's not just a matter of paying what the pirates immediately demand. This is a business for them. They will hold hostages for as long as they can in order to get as much money as possible. So if you were to say, offer them immediately $10 million, $20 million, they would say, well, that's easy, we'd like another $20 million, until they become convinced that they're not going to get one penny more they're not going to release that crew.
But this creates a dilemma for governments like the United States, which generally doesn't pay ransom in these cases. If the U.S. Navy were able to get there, apparently the closest ship is 3 days away, what could they do?
Well, again, putting this particular set of circumstances on aside, the United States is not going to pay ransom. This operates the same way as it would if an executive of a corporation were kidnapped in South America or Southeast Asia. It is the company that engages in the negotiations, not the U.S. government. In these particular circumstances, we have, apart from the unusual venue, this is essentially the kind of barricade and hostage situation that our police forces in this country deal with all the time, where bank robbers may hold a hostage or a gunman may hold a hostage, and there will be some effort made to bring about the safe return of the hostage and hopefully also bring the pirates to justice.
Assuming that this is a big ship that is being outrun by little dinghies, little boats, as you pointed out, coming from the mothership, trying to encircle the ship, climbing on board, old-fashioned in its takeover methods. How do you guard against something like this? Certainly just arming the sailors on board wouldn't be enough if someone is brazen enough.
Well, there have been suggestions that the crew should be armed, but generally the ship owners have resisted this, and there are issues about turning a merchant ship into a warship by arming the crew. There have been suggestions that armed security guards should be placed on board rather than arming the crews. Again, that has been resisted. The ships take protective measures themselves, either by their speed or by maneuvers. A big ship, when it maneuvers and makes sharp turns, can create a huge wake and swells that make it difficult for the little motorboats to approach. Further things that have been recommended, and in some cases installed, are vessels have fire hoses that they can use to fend off the attackers, and even to the point of the recommendation that the railings and around the ship's deck be electrified, which would prevent the boarding from the small vessels. So all of those have been recommended, and in some cases, in a few cases, they are in place.
All right. Well, we can only hope for the safety of the captain of the ship. Brian Jenkins, thank you so much.
Thank you.
In other news today, aftershocks hurt efforts to assess earthquake damage in central Italy. Italian police put the death toll from Monday's quake at 272 people. We have a report from Kemi Inzerum of Independent Television News.
There are still miracles. 98-year-old Maria D'Antuono was trapped by the dead body of her best friend. It saved her life. When she was pulled out today, she simply asked for a hairbrush. And so now, L'Aquila's residents come to inspect the damage. The spire of the basilica knocked off center, roads strewn with rubble, and the homes all abandoned.
So, from here, where is the risk from here?
With more tremors every day, the danger is everywhere.
The fire brigade has forbidden me from coming back because there could be more collapse. I don't know how many months I'll be out. They've spoken about at least 3 months.
Normally, this road would be bustling, but it's almost completely deserted. There are people here, they've braved coming back to get the odd possession. But the problem is, even if your home is safe, what about the next door building, the next door apartment block? The big question everyone's asking, just how long will it take them to get home?
The government's pledged millions of extra euros for reconstruction, but warns rebuilding L'Aquila is a challenge on a scale they've never faced before. Many unsafe buildings will have to be demolished.
Since this morning, there are 1,500 technicians who will go into all the apartments, monuments, churches and institutions to identify the level of damage. This will take at least 15 to 20 days, and only then will we have a clear idea of the situation.
Take the modern and supposedly quake-proof hospital. evacuated after it began to crumble. Specialist earthquake engineers monitor suspect vibrations during each aftershock. We're told that these warped steel supports are no longer fully supporting the building's weight, and it won't withstand another big tremor. And until L'Aquila has a functioning hospital, this town of 70,000 will remain displaced. If they're lucky, lodging with relatives, otherwise cramming into tents.
At the Vatican, Pope Benedict XVI pledged to visit the quake zone soon after the Easter holiday. A bomb hidden in a plastic bag exploded near Baghdad's most revered Shiite shrine. At least 7 Iraqis died and more than 20 others were wounded. The explosion went off in a pedestrian-only shopping area circling the holy site. It was one in a series of bombings across Baghdad this week, mainly in Shiite areas. There was more violence in southern Afghanistan today. A NATO soldier was killed in what a NATO statement described as a hostile incident. No other information was given. And in Uruzgan province, U.S. coalition and Afghan troops fought militants with mortar fire, killing 6. In Washington, there was another sign U.S. policy toward Iran was shifting. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said the U.S. will be a full participant in major talks. The EU Foreign Policy Chief Javier Solana has invited Iran to attend a new session of nuclear talks with the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council and Germany. Before Clinton's remarks, Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad welcomed a dialogue with the U.S. In Tehran, he insisted talks will happen only if American pledges to improve strained relations are genuine.
If a hand is extended to Iran with honesty and justice, the Iranian nation will welcome it. But if it is a hand with covert dishonesty, the Iranian nation's response to that will be the same response it gave to Mr. Bush.
No time frame for a date of the nuclear meeting was given or any indication if Iran would accept the invitation. Meantime, an American journalist held in Iran was charged with spying for the U.S. Roxana Saberi, a dual citizen of the U.S. and Iran, has been jailed for more than 2 months. On initial charges, she was working without press credentials. She has reported for the BBC and National Public Radio, among others. Secretary of State Clinton reiterated calls for her speedy release. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder today replaced the head of the Justice Department's Internal Ethics Unit. Mary Patrice Brown, a Washington prosecutor, will lead the Office of Professional Responsibility. The appointment comes one day after a federal judge ordered a criminal investigation into how U.S. prosecutors handled the corruption case of former Republican Senator Ted Stevens. A conviction against him was thrown out yesterday. Police in Binghamton, New York, reported more details of last week's deadly shootings at an immigration center. The gunman fired 98 shots from 2 handguns in little more than 1 minute. Police said almost all of the 13 victims died instantly. Separately, police in Southern California investigated a late-night shooting at a Korean religious retreat. 1 person was killed and 3 others injured when a man opened fire with a revolver. The U.S. Treasury Department said some life insurers have qualified for the government's financial rescue program. But a spokesman clarified that there is no new bailout for the life insurance industry. The Wall Street Journal reported today that the Treasury Department will expand aid to some insurers using funds from the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP. On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 47 points to close at 78.37. The NASDAQ rose 29 points to close at 1590. Sports fans, today marked a historic season by the University of Connecticut women's basketball team. UConn won their 6th national championship last night in St. Louis, beating Louisville 76-54. The win clinched an undefeated season in which the women Huskies beat every opponent by at least 10 points. And still to come on the NewsHour tonight, Cuban relations, a tale of 2 Indias, and the gay marriage movement. Ray Suarez has our Cuba story. There's talk of the Obama administration relaxing travel rules, and some in Congress want to go further. Several members of the Congressional Black Caucus met yesterday in Havana with Fidel Castro. Ray talked earlier with one of them, Representative Barbara Lee, Democrat of California.
You are among a very small group of American elected officials who've had a chance to talk to Fidel Castro since he gave up office, since he's been sick. Tell us about that encounter and what kind of shape you found the former leader in.
Well, I tell you, he's had many health care challenges, but he was in very good shape. We met him at his house with his wife, Mrs. Castro. They do have 5 children. She greeted us at the gate. He was standing at the front door, and we walked through the gardens and greeted him. He was standing up, and he walked back and sat down, and we talked. He was very engaging. His memory was as good as my memory, as your memory. He's 82 years old. He talked about a variety of issues. He asked a lot of questions. You know, we were there during the 41st anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. We placed a wreath and had a memorial service at a memorial in Havana honoring Dr. King.
What did Fidel Castro have to say about the current American administration and his desires for Cuban-American relations in the near term?
His desires, and he is not president, and he made that very clear, that it's not up to him. But he wants to see normal relations with Cuba. He said that he believes that President Obama is very smart. He is reshaping America's image in the world. He knows what he's doing. He's intelligent, and he is hopeful. He understands this new era of optimism. And let me tell you, the Cuban people are very optimistic. The Bush administration in the last 8 years enacted some very harsh, very inhumane policies. So this administration in Cuba, Mr. Raul Castro, also has that same level of optimism and hope, understanding and recognizing the realities of what our president is faced with. But here in Congress, and I'm very pleased to say that, you know, we're working on a variety of measures, legislation that would end the travel ban for all Americans. And so I think that on the Cuban front, they're watching, they're waiting, and they're hopeful.
Did Fidel Castro say he wanted to help the Obama administration?
He wants to make sure that Cuba does whatever it needs to do to ensure that dialogue and discussion takes place that could lead to normal relations. And that means, of course, normal relations, discussions without preconditions. And I believe that the Cubans want to make sure they do everything that's necessary, short of giving up their national sovereignty. I mean, we would not do that in an era of mutual respect and national sovereignty, to engage in the type of dialogue that could be productive. And so I know they want to do that and help move that forward. President Raul Castro said that, as well as the ministers and others.
Did you get into any technical conversations about how things could be different? What was your brief, you and the delegation, as you spoke with the head of state of another country?
We talked about trade and the markets, and how Cuba would be an entirely new market for American goods and services and products. It's much better. They want to trade with America. It's closer, the prices are better, the quality, so they want to buy American. Why in the world are we keeping our businesses from profiting from the Cuban market? It just doesn't make sense. Europe is there, all Latin American countries are there. It's wrong, I think, and we have to really understand that the economic benefits, especially in an economic downturn in our own country, Cuba offers a very new market and a new way to make money for American businesses and to create jobs in our own country. So we talked somewhat at length about that.
There are Cubans standing up to tremendous pressure, tremendous curtailing of their freedom to oppose the regime, to ask for the Castros to move from the stage. Did you talk to any of those Cubans?
I have talked to the dissident community on many occasions. As I said, I have visited Cuba since 1977. The purpose of this trip was to talk to government officials primarily, to talk about what we need to do, what we need to communicate to begin the framework and establishing a dialogue between our two countries.
you've said several times that you feel the wind is blowing in your direction, that there's a lot of support for reopening the relationship, lifting the travel ban. Do you think this can be done quickly?
I know it can be done quickly. The question is the political will there to do it quickly? And I'm not certain yet. I believe that it has to be done in a way that everyone agrees that this needs to be done. I think it could be done today, myself. I think we could lift the travel ban today. But where there's a will, there's a way. And that's how many of us, especially in the Congressional Black Caucus, have always lived our lives. When we believe that there's something right to do, and remembering that members of the Congressional Black Caucus and the CBC as a body have been known as the conscience of the Congress, when we believe that there's something we need to do that is right and that's just, we always have to have that hope that that can happen. And in this instance, I'm hopeful, but I also understand the practical realities of how difficult it could be, but we're going to try to make it a lot easier.
Congresswoman Lee, thanks for talking to us today.
Thank you very much.
For more on that trip and where U.S.-Cuban relations might be headed, we get two views. Alfredo Duran is vice president of the Cuban Committee for Democracy, a nonprofit organization advocating dialogue with Cuba. And Mauricio Claver Carone is director of the U.S.-Cuba Democracy Political Action Committee, which advocates keeping the embargo and other sanctions in place. Mauricio Claver Carone, you just heard Congresswoman Lee. It's been a while since American elected officials have had high-level contacts with Cuba's rulers. Was there anything useful about the trip, in your view?
Actually, no, I think it's a lost opportunity. You know, currently in Cuba, you have individuals like Dr. Oscar Elias Bisset spending 25 years in prison, Afro-Cuban. This is a modern-day Nelson Mandela in Cuban prisons. You have Jorge Luis Garcia Perez Antunes, also Afro-Cuban, 40-year-old, who spent 20 years in prison already and has been on a hunger strike since February 17th, practicing civil disobedience. A modern-day Dr. Martin Luther King. And yet, these members of the Congressional Black Caucus, which are supposed to promote racial diversity, have got into this country, which 60 to 70% of which is Afro-Cuban or of mixed race, and have decided to ignore these Afro-Cuban leaders, have decided to simply meet with this minority-ruled of individuals, Fidel and Raul Castro, and the 5 or 6 individuals that control this country with an iron fist, of which are in the racial minority in this country, there, and ignore the plight of everyday Cubans. What could have been a great progress is, you know, at the end of the day, regardless of what these individuals do, in Cuba there will be a bottom-to-the-top approach, similar to Poland with Walesa, Havel in the former Czechoslovakia, Mandela in South Africa. They missed that opportunity, and instead they chose to go for a top-down approach, which a handful of power-hungry individuals.
Well, you heard Congresswoman Lee say that just wasn't on the agenda this time, that she's met with dissidents in past trips to Cuba. That's not sufficient for you?
Actually, I would challenge that. I do not know of any occasion in which Congresswoman Lee has met with Cuban dissidents. Actually, quite the opposite. Every time she's gone to Cuba, she has met with regime officials and then lavished praise upon those regime officials and even questioned the dictatorship as if there wasn't one.
Alfredo Duran, is there any usefulness that you can see to the Congressional Black Caucus delegation heading to Havana?
Oh, I believe so. I believe that it's about time that the United States and Cuba starts in the process of dialogue and distension. We have been maintaining this policy of embargo for the past 50 years, and it has not worked. It's not working now, and it won't work for the next 50 years. It's about time that we bring about a change. The status quo is what we need to change in Cuba. We have a whole dynamic of generational changes in Cuba. We have the historicals who are all above 80 years of age. And the only way that we're going to bring about a future of prosperity, of liberty, of democracy in Cuba is if we can send a strong message that the United States is not the enemy of the Cuban people, that the United States is prepared to sit down and try to resolve the differences, and hopefully in that same table we can have the Cuban opposition sit down and discuss the future of Cuba. We need to have national reconciliation. We need to have the people starting to talk to each other in order to bring about a transition, a peaceful transition towards democracy in Cuba. I think it was helpful.
Just in the past few weeks, the Obama administration relaxed the Bush-era travel ban and went back roughly to the Clinton standards with remittances and once-a-year trips. Do you want to go further than that?
Well, I think President Obama is about ready to announce the lifting of all the restrictions of travel for Cuban Americans and of sending of remittances. I think that is very important. The moment that the Cubans family, the Cubans in Cuba, start receiving substantial aid from their families, it makes the government irrelevant. They don't need the government to be able to subsist and to resolve their problems. That is one of the most important things that can happen out of the Cuban Americans traveling, and I think that we must go further than that. We must absolutely lift all restrictions for Americans to travel to Cuba. It's a constitutional right of all Americans to be protected. It must be protected under the laws of this country, and I think that if Cuban Americans are allowed to go, Americans should be allowed to go, and I think that's going to have a tremendous impact, because the travel of Americans is not like the travel of Europeans or Canadians. Cubans play baseball, they don't play hockey, and our cultural nearness is very similar. You go to Cuba right now, and it's like the Russians had never gone by there. You go to Cuba right now, and you still can feel the influence of our American tradition in the past and our cultural nearness. So I think it's important that travel be permitted. I think I would wish that Obama would go further than that. I don't think it will. I think that the United States, Cuba is not a top priority right now, and I think first he's going to deal with the economy and with the Middle East, Iraq, Iran, and all of that.
Let me turn to Mauricio Claver Carone with that same question regarding the Obama relaxation and now looking ahead to possible even further loosening of the travel ban.
I think the bottom line, we have to understand that what U.S. law, which is basically U.S. policy towards Cuba, was codified into law in 1996. What it basically does is it sets conditions for the political and commercial engagement with the Castro regime. We engage with the Cuban people on a daily basis. We're the #1 providers of humanitarian aid to Cuba. We have 15 categories of purposeful travel, from academic to religious to humanitarian family travel. But to do business with the Cuban regime, the three conditions are: they have to release all the Cuban political prisoners, they have to recognize fundamental human, civil, and political rights, and legalize the opposition. For us to unilaterally change U.S. law and change policy in order to allow that, we would have to be sending a message to this Western Hemisphere, of which 34 out of 35 countries are democratic, that we do not care about one, two, or all three of those conditions. That's a very dangerous message to send, particularly to a hemisphere that has historic authoritarian tendencies, and there's more than a few currently democratically elected presidents in Latin America that would love to take it the next step to authoritarianism. What keeps them from doing that is the fact that the United States, under the 2001 Inter-American Democratic Charter, has a responsibility and a commitment to representative democracy. If we turn the blind eye with Cuba, that sole dictatorship, we open up a Pandora's box that we might regret, and before you know it, we might be back to the 60s, 70s, and 80s with dictatorships of the left and of the right throughout Latin America.
Quick response, Mr. Duran?
Well, what Mauricio is advocating is what we've been doing for the past 50 years, and we haven't seen any changes. Quite on the contrary. We have seen a more rigid position on part of the Cuban government. It's about time that we change a policy that doesn't work. If this policy was made by the president of General Motors, he would have been fired a long time ago. It's a position that hasn't worked in 50 years. It's not working now, and it won't work in the future. It's about time that we take other steps that will change the status quo in Cuba.
There are bipartisan bills, Mauricio, in both houses now, and from Republicans who are not historic friends of Cuba, to reverse the policies of the recent past. Barbara Lee talked about political will. Do you feel the political winds changing regarding Cuba in the United States?
The bills that we see in Congress currently have the same co-sponsors, the same names, the same individuals that have presented and co-sponsored these bills the last Congress and the Congress before that. It's the same players and the same individuals. We have yet to see a tide of individuals that have supported current U.S. policy change their position. When we see that happen, will be when in Cuba democratic reforms will begin. The people that currently support U.S. policy have a commitment to the Cuban pro-democracy movement that I mentioned at the beginning, to the Cuban civil society, and to see democratic reforms in Cuba. You know, basically, the litmus, the moral litmus, is on them. You know, we talk a lot about 50 years and a failed policy. I'm 33 years old, and I see all the time in a group of us when they were sitting together, and sometimes it feels very frustrating because every time you see in the media, it's all about 50 years of policy, etc. And we said, you know, we must know what the Jewish people have felt like, you know, for 2,000, 3,000 years before the State of Israel was created, because they were very much alone. But you know what? They were on the right side of history.
Mauricio Claver Carone, Alfredo Duran, Gentlemen, thank you both.
Thank you.
Now, part 3 of our series on India, a nation of high-tech innovation amid traditional poverty. Special correspondent Simon Marks reports.
It's dawn in the Springs, a manicured suburb of new homes that look like they could be anywhere in Middle America. Sprinkler systems water lawns, dogs bark, and Sarisha Gumaregula leaves home for another day in the office, on the cutting edge of India's economic explosion.
It's always, for me, exciting to go to work because I think I control about, maybe 40% of my day, and the rest 60% is, things that are happening, because, you're executing this really tight deadline projects.
Sarisha lives and works in Hyderabad, a city in southern India that is in the vanguard of the country's embrace of high-tech industries. So much so that one area of Hyderabad is even called High-Tech City. The locals have dubbed it Cyberabad. Sarisha's office block houses several major industry players, including Google's local operation. And it houses her own company, a legal firm called Quizlex, that she started when she returned to India 5 years ago, after more than a decade working as an attorney in Manhattan.
I did not expect to stay as long as I did. My plan was to get a couple of years experience and then bring it back to India, but I was having a lot of fun doing what I was doing, and so progressed enough in the career, and then again started thinking about, how to come back to India.
And the difference between the India that you left and the India that you came back to?
Is yawning. It's a huge difference.
A huge difference that is transforming the face of Hyderabad and some other Indian cities and reshaping the Indian economy. The growth of the high-tech sector has been the principal pillar, helping India to achieve record GDP growth of more than 8% every year since 2004.
We need to be able to clearly show an advantage to the client.
At Quizlex, the whole concept of outsourcing goes way beyond the Indian call centers that many US companies now use to provide customer service. Sarisha's firm offers legal process outsourcing. It's provided by a stable of around 200 young Indian attorneys. While the United States sleeps, they analyze legal documents emailed to them by American law firms. They comb through depositions, draft contracts, and do much of the basic grunt work that would otherwise occupy hours of billable time by more expensive US-based attorneys.
You're looking at resources that have gone to a 5-year law school, a very competitive, law school. So to a certain extent, their analysis, or the skill set that they pick up in Indian legal schools is no different, than an American, legal school.
The combination of modern technology and a low-wage, highly competent workforce is helping Quizlex and its rivals to make sizable contributions to India's growth. The average attorney here earns around 1/5 of the salary their US analog demands. And the company's founder says in this area of the economy, demand continues to outstrip supply, as the recession leads more US law firms to examine increasingly cost-effective ways of doing business.
Just before, I was sitting in a meeting with our operations folks and looking at a lot more additional space because we are hiring, people rapidly. And there is work that we are turning down because we are not able to, handle. So I don't see any of that changing in the next couple of years, definitely.
It is easy to look on India as a country on the march. In Gurgaon, just outside the capital, New Delhi, the foundations have been dug for a series of new shopping malls and Western hotels. Enormous holes in the ground that will soon be filled by buildings bearing familiar global logos. The capital is also building a subway system. Some stations are already open, more will follow by the end of next year. But due to the global recession, the economy is slowing down here. Growth estimates have been cut to 6 or 7%, still respectable under any circumstances, and remarkable considering the contraction being experienced elsewhere. but it's a cut that alarms representatives of Indian business.
Having a positive 7% growth is certainly an advantage. But is that enough? No.
Dr. Amit Mitra heads the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. It represents 1,500 leading Indian enterprises.
Every year, 9 million young people join the labor force in India because of the young population, and they need jobs. 3 million people remain behind from the previous year who may not have found the ideal job. So we have to have at least between 9 to 12 million jobs creation. For that we need 9 to 10% growth. So 7%, which is what we are growing at today, for us is not enough.
To understand why it is not enough, you only have to drive 2 hours outside Hyderabad to the farming village of Picharagada. These are scenes not often associated with modern India, an agricultural economy operating at its most rudimentary level. Around 500 families eke out a living in these fields, growing ginger, watermelon and wheat. They are emblematic of a much larger picture. 2/3 of India's billion-plus population, that's more than 600 million people, still live in agricultural communities like this one. Here, there isn't enough rainfall, so the villagers have built an elementary irrigation system, supported by deep wells that they dig by hand. In a good year, farmer Shakil Ahmed told us he can earn around $1,000 to support a family of 5.
There's nothing here. There's not enough electricity, not enough water. One has to work very hard, and you don't make enough money. There just aren't enough rewards for the work that we do.
But there is an army of people still relying on the land to sustain them and to support them when they can't find or lose jobs in the cities. Like villages all over India, what happens here is subsistence farming at its most basic. The farmers say that the ginger root in this storeroom will stay fresh for up to 1 year. But while resources pour into India's high-tech sector, the agricultural economy is so undeveloped that fully 1/4 of the country's crops rot before they can ever be sold or eaten. We spent almost a full day in the countryside outside Hyderabad, and only once did we see any sign of mechanization. This primitive threshing machine is shared by the farmers of Picharagada and its surrounding villages. One example of what they say could be.
It makes me angry, but it's all down to fate. Of course, our life would be different if the government provided some facilities here, but the right kind of development is not taking place in India.
I believe by not concentrating on agriculture, we have created a quagmire of absolute concern at the lowest level.
New Delhi-based economist Suhail Seth says that while the world focuses on the impressive economic growth being achieved in India's cities, it's failing to notice that the vast majority of Indians have yet to see any improvement in their daily lives.
Ask the guy in a village. Ask the guy who doesn't have electrification. When you tell him about India shining and you tell him about brand India and you talk about all this hype and, Indo-US nuclear deal, it means nothing.
There are political forces seeking to capitalize upon that, and even in Hyderabad's high-tech city there are signs of communist imagery on the streets. In rural districts in more than half of India's territory, Maoist insurgents called Naxals have emerged as a serious threat to Western-style development. They're waging a violent campaign to halt it in its tracks, and the government calls them one of the most serious threats to India's national security. But back at legal outsourcing firm Quizlex in Hyderabad, and at enterprises like it throughout India, the focus remains on forging ahead. Sirisha Gumaregala argues that given enough time, India's progress will eventually reach all sectors of society.
This country has fought 3 wars. We've always seen conflict. Hyderabad, to a certain extent, because of its, because of its Muslim-Hindu, breakdown is always can be a tinderbox. But does it take away all of the progress that we have made? I don't think, it does. I think in 10 years or so, we will get to the stage of, kind of a European or at a US stage of development, and some of those things we can put behind us.
At just after 11 o'clock at night, she leaves the office, another long day under her belt, another contribution made to India's economic development. But it will take many more long days, if not decades, in their offices before Indian executives will head for home, knowing they have fully transformed the country's society.
Simon's next report looks at India as an emerging superpower in a tough neighborhood. Backers of same-sex marriage gained a major victory at the state level yesterday, capping a week of big developments in the battle playing out in state courts and capitals. NewsHour correspondent Kwame Holman begins with some background.
It was an emotional moment for supporters of same-sex marriage in Vermont.
Please signify by saying aye.
On Tuesday, legislators there voted to legalize same-sex marriage, narrowly overriding a veto from Republican Governor Jim Douglas. Shap Smith is the House Speaker.
For the people who are voting to override the veto, they're basically voting to support the majority of Vermonters.
Vermont's vote marks the first time a state has allowed same-sex marriage by legislative action rather than a court ruling. It also makes Vermont the fourth state, joining Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Iowa, to allow gay marriages. The decision came just days after Iowa's Supreme Court voted unanimously to legalize gay marriages there. Kathy and Kim Gibson arrived at their county recorder's office on Monday to apply for a marriage license.
Why is being the first important? Because we've been waiting for 18 years?
Supporters celebrated the back-to-back victories. Beth Robinson is with the Freedom to Marry Task Force in Vermont.
I think the Iowa Supreme Court decision on Friday really drove home that this isn't some radical, newfangled idea that's going away.
But Governor Douglas said many disagreed with the decision to allow same-sex marriage.
I think this is such an emotional, divisive, personal issue. It's something that individuals have to decide how to vote on based on their personal convictions and faith.
The battle is hardly over. California's top court allowed gay marriages last year, but a voter initiative in November reversed that decision. Meanwhile, there are other efforts to provide legal protections for same-sex couples. Washington, D.C.'s City Council voted yesterday to recognize same-sex marriages performed elsewhere. New York State already does so. 5 more states, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Washington, Oregon, and California, provide some legal protections for civil unions or domestic partnerships. But voters in 29 other states have approved constitutional amendments banning gay marriage.
And for more on these developments, we turn to Jessica Garrison. She's been covering this issue for the Los Angeles Times. Jessica, 2 states in quick succession. How big a deal is this?
Well, I think that depends on who you ask. Supporters of gay marriage think it's a very big deal. They were very disheartened when Proposition 8 passed in California last November, which took away the right to marry in California. But then to discover that the Iowa Supreme Court was going to allow gay marriage, and then 4 days later that Vermont was going to allow it, really made people feel like the momentum is on their side.
How did the proponents pull this off? What was involved? And I know it's different getting it through a legislature than it is when a Supreme Court moves as in Iowa, but what's behind this?
Well, you know, there are gay rights activists in every state pushing for gay marriage, and you know, in terms of how proponents pulled it off in Iowa, that was simply a ruling by the Supreme Court. In Vermont, Vermont has long been on the cutting edge of a lot of civil rights issues. They were the first state in the union to recognize civil unions, and there were legislators there that were very committed to doing this, and they laid the groundwork, and they were able to do it, and then they were able to override the veto.
Is there somehow more authority invested in a move like this when it's a legislature that passes a law rather than a court ruling?
Well, Again, I think like a lot of things on this debate, that depends on who you ask. I think a lot of the people in support of gay marriage would say to that question, yes, of course, because the lawmakers represent the will of the people, and so this is a more direct endorsement of gay marriage than maybe a court ruling. I think that opponents of gay marriage would answer that question differently, and they might point out that Vermont is a very liberal place, that the population of Vermont is only 600,000 people, and then they would also probably tell you that they don't think, even given those things, that it does represent the will of the people of Vermont.
Do you have a sense of why all this is happening right now? Is it just a coincidence? Is there some underlying reason why there's more support?
Why are we?
Right.
Well, I think that Vermont and Iowa happening at the same time is sort of a coincidence. I think that the reason that all of the states are grappling with this is because people are introducing legislation, and the reason people are introducing legislation is that gay rights activists and their supporters in every state are pushing for it. So that's why all this legislation is coming up. The court cases are coming up in part because people are filing lawsuits, and the lawsuits are working their way through the courts, and they're reaching, the Supreme Courts, and they're being decided. So, in part it's coming up because people are pushing for it to come up.
And how are opponents reacting? Are they planning to try to unwind all of this?
I think that people are preparing for battle in Iowa. Opponents also released some television advertising across a lot of markets in the Northeast that that advertise against gay marriage and in favor of traditional marriage, and that they were planning to put those out a little bit later this spring, but after what happened in Iowa and Vermont, they stepped it up and released it this week. They're also preparing to try to do in Iowa what they did in California, which was to amend the state constitution. It's a lot harder to amend the constitution in Iowa than it is in California, and it will take at least 2 years to do that there.
So it sounds like this has been kind of a wake-up call for the anti-gay marriage folks.
Well, I'm not sure that they were asleep. I mean, they did spend, upwards of $35 million in California last fall. I think that Iowa really sort of took people by surprise. And so they have, I think that, I just, as I was coming to the studio to do this interview, got an email from one of the opponents of gay marriage group urging me to, not urging me, but urging supporters of traditional marriage to start calling legislatures in Iowa. So they have definitely stepped it up in the days since these two actions were taken.
And what's your sense, Jessica, of how this plays out in the weeks and the months to come? What other states, I know Kwame Holman mentioned some of this in that report, but what other states should we look to see some changes?
You should definitely look at New Hampshire. You should look at New Jersey, New York, Maine. All of those states are considering legislation. And then, of course, out here, all eyes are on California because everybody's waiting to see what the Supreme Court will do. And if the Supreme Court upholds Proposition 8, the gay rights supporters already have field organizers on the ground getting ready for the next campaign when this comes back on the ballot as soon as 2010.
And meanwhile, in the background, public opinion. I was reading today, there has not been much of a shift in that regard. What's your reading on that?
Well, I think the polls are they tell you exactly that this is an issue that people feel very strongly about. They don't move very much on this issue, and that there really hasn't been much of a shift. So I think that's an interesting question of how in order to, for example, in California, they waged one of the most expensive campaigns ever fought, and they were really fighting over a tiny, tiny slice of the electorate because those are the only people who are ever going to change their opinions on this. Both sides have very passionately held views that just don't move. I think what people will tell you is that the younger the voter, the more likely they are to support gay marriage. And so a lot of gay rights activists believe that time is sort of on their side because as you get more young voters and as older voters, as the electorate grows younger, that time will help them on this.
Well, we hear you and Jessica Garrison with the Los Angeles Times. We thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, the major developments of the day. The American crew of a container ship carrying food aid bound for Kenya regained control, but the captain was held hostage on a nearby lifeboat. The Associated Press, citing U.S. officials, reported U.S. warships in the area were en route to the scene. Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad said that he welcomed a dialogue with the U.S. as long as it was genuine. And aftershocks hampered efforts to assess earthquake damage in central Italy. Italian police put the death toll from Monday's quake at 272 people. And a reminder, you can find us online at our new one-stop address, newshour.pbs.org. Tonight, you can find more on the pirates of East Africa, including maps, a timeline, and a lesson plan for teachers. Watch our previous reports on Cuba, including Robert McNeil's 1985 interview with Fidel Castro. Read a blog about attitudes toward gay marriage around the U.S., and follow a link to Vermont Public Radio's coverage of the issue. Remember, the NewsHour is available whenever you want it at newshour.pbs.org. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening. I'm Judy Woodruff. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by Chevron, Intel, supporting math and science education for tomorrow's innovators, and by Grant Thornton.
And the National Science Foundation, supporting education and research across all fields of science and engineering.
And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to...
I'm on your side.
It's the Rat Pack, live at the Sands. It's Frank.
That's why the lady is a tramp.
Sammy.
Old black magic has me in a spell.
And Dean. Complete with a 15-piece big band. They'll be swinging on stage with the gorgeous Borelli sisters. This really is the coolest party in town. Now through Sunday at Keller Auditorium. Tickets available at Ticketmaster or by phone. Welcome by Fred Meyer and K2.
Now through April 19th is New Balance Portland's gigantic spring shoe sale. Great savings on athletic shoes for running, walking, hiking, and more, all at special sale prices. Train fit specialists to ensure a perfect fit each and every time in a store filled exclusively with New Balance shoes, all on sale. The New Balance Spring Shoe Sale now through April 19th. Only at the New Balance Portland stores in Bridgeport Village and downtown in Pioneer Place.
Visit buyweston.com or call 503-665-2166 now and drive home a new 2009 Pontiac G3. This week at Weston Pontiac, it's just $89.88 or $149 a month. You heard right. Under $9,000 for a new sporty Pontiac G3. 0% financing available. And only GM offers the total confidence package. So why buy used when you can drive home a new Pontiac for under $10,000?
Come see us today at Oregon's #1 volume Pontiac Buick GMC dealer. Or call me. Just ask for Dan.
Get to Weston Pontiac today or call 503-665-2166 now.
Is slimy green and slippery black algae, moss, and mold invading your home's beauty? Clean it all the easy way with 30 Seconds Outdoor Cleaner. Simply spray it on and hose it off. It's that easy. 30 Seconds Outdoor Cleaner is made in the Northwest for homes just like yours.